The next step in our 68 Camaro project was to install a Detroit Speed 3 front suspension kit using the stock subframe. We took some time to clean up the original subframe and fix the body mounts and some of the messed up welds. And now it was time to do some mods to make this car handle much better than any stock 68 Camaro ever did. And the reason why we chose the Detroit Speed 3 kit is, well, there's a bunch of reasons. First of all, it's a very complete kit, which we'll get into the parts in a second, but the Detroit Speed parts are all designed to work well and they're proven on the track. It seems like every weekend throughout the racing season, these guys are out beating up their cars on a track somewhere, either a road course track or an autocross. You even see them on drag strips. And what they're doing is not just showing off for the crowd, they're taking notes and proving their parts to design these things to function the way they're supposed to. And that says a lot about a company when they put their parts on display in front of a crowd, you know, week after week, because it really forces them to make stuff that performs. And we now know that all of their parts are track proven, which means it's good enough for our car, definitely. Detroit Speed offers a bunch of options when it comes to outfitting the front suspension of a first-generation Camaro and Firebird. In fact, their product line now goes way beyond just the F-body cars. They do stuff for newer cars, G-bodies, A-body Chevelles, things like that, and also Novas and other cars like that. The most advanced option that Detroit Speed offers is a fully hydroformed, brand new front subframe that you can get from them, which completely replaces your original parts. And that's all out. I mean, if you want the best possible front subframe, you know, that's your option. The kit we chose is designed to add some trick parts to an existing stock type subframe. And this is their most advanced kit for a stock subframe, which means you're going to have to do some modifications to the steel subframe itself. The kit consists of some tubular upper and lower control arms, and these are TIG welded, computer designed, powder coated pieces that are designed to include a little more caster so that this car tracks more like a newer car instead of being kind of twitchy like the original front suspension was. Things that they have included in this design are Delrin greasable bushings, which are much more precise than rubber, but they're also very smooth, and they allow these arms to articulate throughout their travel nice and smooth. Detroit Speed incorporates a billet steel cross shaft with some tunable bushings. They're an offset bushing that goes inside that arm, which allows you to adjust that caster angle. They also offer a pretty trick set of machined shims, so when it comes to final alignment, it's easy to do. The ball joint pockets are machined from a solid piece of billet so that they're nice and precise, and the whole arm itself is gloss black powder coated, so they're ready to install. The lower control arms offer a lot of the same features as the upper with an improved design. This kit also contains a coil-over spring and shock conversion kit, which eliminates the traditional coil spring in favor of an adjustable shock absorber with a coil-over type spring. And these are nice because you can change the spring out to change different spring rates, and the whole unit can come in and out of the car as one piece. You don't necessarily need the spring compressor like, you know, the old days. And also, these allow you to adjust the ride height, not dramatically, but just enough to get everything dialed in. The kit is rounded out with a Detroit Speed 600 steering box, which is a quicker ratio steering box designed to offer a more positive steering feel, some tie rod ends, some DSE steel tie rod adjusting sleeves that are a little beefier than the stock type stamped, rolled, you know, flat steel pieces. These are the tie rod ends and the sleeves as part of the Detroit Speed kit, and you'll notice the two different colored jam nuts. This isn't a mistake. These are reversed. One of them is reverse thread. I think the gold one is reverse thread, and that's how they differentiate the two, because these have opposite threads, so that when you loosen this up, turn it the one way and this whole assembly gets longer, turn it the other way and it gets shorter, and then the nuts just lock into place. And the last piece is a unique fixture that you bolt to the subframe that allows you to install this whole thing and have proper geometry. So to install this, what you do is strip your subframe down and then cut the original upper control arm mounts off the subframe. In our case, we used a plasma cutter to quickly zap those off, and then an air grinding disc to grind all the remnants down nice and smooth. And this reveals the upper spring pocket as well, which is going to get cut out to make room for the new coil-over shock. Next, you bolt in that supplied fixture to the engine mount bolt holes in the subframe crossmember. And what this is going to do is provide the mounting locations for the new Detroit Speed upper control arm mounting brackets. Once you mark off on the subframe where these brackets need to go, you can use a cutoff wheel or a plasma torch or whatever kind of saw that you need to do to cut a slot in the original subframe. Once you cut that slot open, the new Detroit Speed brackets will drop into the slot, and then you can bolt them to that fixture, and now you know that they are in the proper location and at the proper angle, and they're ready to be welded in. And the last thing to do to the subframe is to cut out that upper spring pocket to open up the hole for the coil-over shock. When you get that cut out, you can start to weld in that upper control arm mount. That coil-over shock hole has to be enlarged, not just to fit the shock in the hole, but you have to understand, as the suspension system goes through its travel, that coil-over shock is going to pivot inward and outward, so it needs a little extra clearance. And Detroit Speed realized that you don't want just a gaping, unfinished hole, so they supply a ring that's kind of tapered that you pound into the hole and then weld and grind up the seam, so that when it's all done, there's nothing covering these. They're proudly on display, and they look nice with that curved ring in place. We took some time with our HTP MIG 200 MIG welder to make sure that all the welds look nice. On some of the upper control arm mounts, we did a double pass weld because this is suspension after all, and this car is going to get driven hard. We want to make sure we've got good penetration and welds that look nice. And after we got the pieces welded together, we bolted up the control arms and the coil-over shock units without the springs, just to test fit and make sure everything fit right. And we were happy to see how well everything came together on this. Before we were finished with this subframe, we did some inspection and found that the lower control arm mount points were a little thin from rust. So we plug welded and then seam welded in some heavy washers to reinforce those holes. The final steps for the subframe were to media blast it and strip it clean, and then we shot some BASF epoxy primer on it, and we used the Eastwood internal frame coating with the special aerosol nozzle to coat the inside of the frame with a green hard coating that will keep this thing from rusting from the inside out. Finally, the frame got painted with some BASF satin black, and then we slipped it under the car and started the reassembly. Once all the rest of the parts were detailed out, the steering box got shot black, our tie rod ends, we cleaned up our spindles and all that jazz. Everything looked really, really nice. And when it came time to start assembling this subframe, we were real happy with the way everything looked. And here's another trick we learned in the reassembly of these cars. You don't want to chip and scratch all of your nice new parts. So 3M makes a nice adhesive-backed mask paper. It's white, and we wrap everything we can with it so that when you're putting this stuff together, you don't scratch it. And then as the car's being built, if people lean on it or things bump into it, your nice new shiny parts are all protected. The next step in this project is to install a Detroit Speed Quadra Link rear suspension kit along with a Curry 9 Plus rear axle assembly. And you can learn more about all of the Detroit Speed suspension parts at classicindustries.com.